God was being merciful. And once I realized that He was being merciful, it was at that point I could move on. My thing was I was going to join the military because I always wanted to serve my country. I was going to go take a test to see where I scored and all that. And right prior to that, I had a horrendous car accident that I was not supposed to have lived through. But it's just, at the same time, there was a peace that I knew that God was there. So I figured if this is my time, then it's just my time. And I really don't remember anything from that point. For about 2 weeks later, I woke up, or 2 days later, I woke up, in the hospital and with multiple injuries to my body. And then when I called the recruiter back and he and I began to talk, and he's like, yeah, he said, let's go ahead and get this, let's go ahead and get you in, let's get this thing going. He set my test date up for me and showed up at my house like a day or two before the test date, and he said, we need to talk. And he said, I have some medical records here that we need to talk about. And when he talked to me about my medical records, my heart just sank, because it was like taking the air out of a balloon. It was like a lifelong dream for me to become a Navy SEAL. And basically he looked at me and said, it's just not going to be possible.
I grew up in an era in the 60s and 70s where I didn't know what drugs, alcohol was, had no clue. We were very shielded. And my dad was very, I guess, one of my biggest influences. He didn't like controversy at all. He never raised his voice. He didn't throw fits. My mom was not a fit thrower. They didn't like any type of controversy, whether it was in life or in church or whatever. And so all my life, I've been a peacemaker.
So as I was kind of dealing with that down moment in my life, I had met a lady and we had been dating, and we had decided to get married. And we got married and had 2 beautiful daughters, 2 great kids, very successful young ladies now. Spent some 20 years married to her. She was a great lady. But like everything else, if you don't, I'll use this terminology. It's like a bank account. The marriage is like a bank account. If you don't deposit into it, you can't draw anything out of it. And so I felt like that's what had happened to our marriage, is we weren't depositing into the relationship like we should have, and we actually grew apart rather than growing together. And so we ended up, after 20 years of marriage and having 2 great kids, of being divorced.
I married at 17. I married into an abusive relationship. I didn't know it at the time. And I found out within the first couple of weeks. And being raised that when you marry, you make your bed, you lie in it, basically. I stayed in the relationship for 30 years because I didn't have the courage to get out. But in the end, I just turned to God and I said, look, this is killing me. Mentally, physically, stressful. I couldn't deal with it anymore. And God gave me the grace to get up and walk away. I had to rely on God a lot on anything because I didn't have anybody I could turn to and talk to. When you're in that type relationship, you don't want to explain to a lot of people how you are and what's going on in your life. And a few close friends might have known, but I didn't talk about it.
I was off on a trip, met another young lady, and she and I ended up getting married. And at that time, I thought it was just God's answer for everything for my life. And we spent some 10 years total in our marriage. But after being married for only 5 years, she came down with cancer. And I always had that verse in the Bible that came back to me, where God was speaking to Noah and Adam even. He told him, he says, I've given you every herb of the field, for you and for your healing. And that's what I began to do. Even with Debbie, I used the herbs of the field. I'd done all kind of stuff to help treat her with. And it seemed like it worked perfect. There was no issues. I mean, actually twice they told us that her cancer had disappeared completely. We had done everything that I felt like that a couple should do. I mean, I went through all the extremities. I brought in the elders to pray. We did everything I felt like was scripturally right. And then when God let her pass away, I did, I'll be honest, so there's no almost, I blamed God. I was like, God, you've let me down. You know, it is you who I trusted in solely to heal her and to keep everything going. And I said, you have failed me. And for a long time, for over a year, I actually did not want anything to do with God because I felt like that God had lied.
And I told everybody I didn't need a guy. There was just, I don't need anybody.
I was at a point in my life where I was like, just leave me alone. I don't want to be bothered with this anymore. God, I'm through. I've tried you. I was a minister one time. I ended up going through a divorce. I had to give up the ministry. I've tried going back serving you. You took my wife. You've done all these kind of things. I just had a bitter attitude. For the first time in my life, I realized what it was to be alone.
And after the third year, I kind of got lonely. I'm thinking, I need something in my life.
I said, here I am. I'm 51 years old now. I've got a heart condition. I've been broke all to pieces because I've had multiple accidents in my life and had to learn how to walk twice in my life. And I was like, there is no female out there that's going to want a guy in this condition.
I had decided to go on a dating site. I thought, why not? And during that time, it was like picking and choosing guys. You could say, okay, this one has good qualities, let me see. And I didn't really date any of them.
So I was like, I just gave up. I was like, Lord, I said, my parents needed someone to take care of them because my dad was falling a lot. My mom had had a stroke. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to go take care of them. And during that time, my brother lived there also. He had been on Christian Mingle and had met his wife on Christian Mingle. Great lady. I mean, just fantastic woman.
I sent about 5 guys messages. I'm getting off. This is ridiculous. It wasn't working out. And I went to the altar one day and I said, Lord, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm trying to make my life what I want it to be, and it's not working. I said, so here, you take it. You do what you're going to do. And about a week later, I was at a state park we had. There was nobody around, it's just me on a beach by the water, watching the water. And again, I'm going, God, you take my life. You do what you're going to do with it. And I went to leave, and my phone rang. And this guy goes, you have to give me a minute. What happened, Danny had seen the message, and he called me. And he said, hey, girl. And his voice was so deep. On the phone, his voice is just like, you could just sit and listen forever. I could just hear him talk. And I'm going, hey. And he starts talking, and he tells me that he had read my message.
From that point on, we talked regularly, almost I would say daily after that. We talked for sometimes 4 and 5 hours at a time.
There were so many things we had in common from the talk in the first night. When we found out we both went to the altar at the same time, God turned both our lives around from that point.
And when she drove up out there, when she stepped out of the vehicle, I instantaneously knew.
And when I met Danny, and I came out here the first time, it's like a peace came over me. It was relaxing, calm, quiet, and he was quiet and calm.
The chemistry was there, the attraction was there. I think we both knew that it was from God when we met face to face for the first time. And course, I didn't know how to take it. When she walked in the house, she just started crying. And I didn't know if it was something to do with me or, or what, but later she told me that she'd always wanted a house that had an octagon room in it with windows in it. Our whole relationship was orchestrated by God. And that, to me, was what I was looking for. Because I didn't do that in my first relationship. I didn't do it in my second relationship. And that's the reason I told God, I said, if I'm going to do this again, you've got to do it, not me. I think it's beautiful how God orchestrates a person's life. How when you're young, if you pay attention to the leadership and the guidance of the Holy Spirit, God can guide you down a path that makes life really easy for you. But if you do what I did and try to do it yourself, then maybe the road just gets a little longer. But in the long run, God will always bring you back because He's loving. And I could not imagine a greater life right now than the one that I have.